Hello and welcome back to the all new, all different number one comics podcast. We are here with a very special guest. And before I announce his name or anything, I'm going to say that we have a Ringo Award-winning comic book writer here who's worked on Punisher, on Moon Knight City of the Dead, Fantastic Four, Hulk, Savage Avengers, done some work on Darth Vader, Black, White, and Red, and then some creator-owned stuff that's amazing. If I say so myself, Spencer and Locke.
Thank you.
Scout's Honor, The Devil That Wears My Face, a current ongoing from Mad Cave that is one of the coolest horror books you've ever read in your life. And Going to the Chapel. Yeah, there's been quite a few things. Of course, I'm talking about David Pepose. David, welcome to the show. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And excited to talk about my brand new book at Dynamite Entertainment, Space Ghost. I'm so thrilled to be able to write this, and even more excited to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this one. Of course, we'll go through the weeds a little bit and absolutely talk about Space Ghost too. But before we get into that, I have to ask, like I always ask everybody this, and I know this is the most generic interview type of question that you can ask, but I feel like you're a special case here because, on your very own website, it says that you're a former crime reporter. So I have to just jump into that for like half a second.
Sure.
You were a crime reporter and then you jumped over to comic books. Tell me how the hell that happened. Tell me about that transition.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Sure. Well, comics have always been my first love. I'm a third generation comics reader. My mother read comics. My grandfather was a comics reader when he was alive. And so that's always been like my first love since I was like 5 years old. But when I was in college, I interned at DC Comics, but it was in 2008, which for those who were keeping score in 2008, there was a horrific worldwide Great Recession going on. So there were no jobs to be had. But when I was in college, I also studied journalism. I was the news editor for my college paper. I interned at a bunch of newsrooms around the country. And so I kind of fell back on that. So I worked for the Berkshire Eagle in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. I often covered the night shift. So I would do the police beat every night. I would call up the police and figure out what, if anything, had happened over the course of that night. And so it kind of run the gamut. Sometimes it was gang violence. Sometimes it was car accidents and weather-related disasters is too strong of a word, but weather-related issues down to teenage guard llamas in farms being bow and arrowed, by drunk kids. So it was a really fun experience. It really kind of taught me not to be afraid of a blank page or a word count or a deadline. I also moonlit over at Newsarama when I was working this night job at a newspaper. So I was kind of, in the mornings I'd be writing reviews and I'd be interviewing creators and really kind of learning the ropes of how comics would work. And then by evening I was covering the crime beat and also the state politics beat. So the way I wound up kind of jumping from one to the other, it's kind of an anticlimactic story in that, I had done other jobs after my newspaper days. I went back to school for publishing. I worked in publicity over at CBS for a long time. And then I was feeling kind of restless. And the thing that everybody told me was if I wanted to work in anything creative in Hollywood, that I would have to come out to Los Angeles. I was in New York at the time. And so at the time, I planned to move out to Los Angeles. I gave myself about a year and a half to get my act together to go. And in that time, I wrote my first book, Spencer and Locke, because at the time I thought if I wanted to work in like development, that it would be good to show that I could break down a story by having created one. And it wasn't until that first book came out that I realized that I was putting the cart so wildly ahead of the horse that if I could just write a book that people liked, I could just keep doing that and not have to jump through all these hoops and Hollywood assistant jobs to go into development where it's, that's being the traffic cop. That's not being the creative voice. So, that's the, really the short answer is I made a comic and people seemed to like it. And so I developed a taste for that and it just kept going. but I feel like my career is very much a zigzag pattern, but I'm using skills that I picked up in all of it all the time. So I really feel like there's no way that I could have gotten where I am in my career today if I hadn't had all those seemingly incongruous steps along the way.
I like that, and I like the fact that I guess I hadn't noticed that yeah, Spencer and Locke, your first book, out from Action Lab in what, like 2016, 2017.
2017.
Okay, 2017, yeah. And yeah, Spencer and Locke, for anybody who hasn't read it, like, for one thing, what the hell are you doing? Go out and read that book, because it's freaking amazing. Like you said, I mean, really acclaimed. Like, I don't know anybody that doesn't love that book. It's so cool. Such a fun concept. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for writing it. But yeah, it's a detective, and he's got like a childhood, like, imaginary friend partner, and like it's just it's a very cool book. I don't want to give anything away, but a really, really cool book that people should absolutely be reading. Did, like, I don't know, dealing with like reporting crime and stuff, like, somehow influence some of that? Did any of that have any spillover? Was it an idea you had before that, or?
Well, so not so much in the specifics, because
Mhm.
I was covering crime in an interesting part of Massachusetts. It was sort of a very rural part of Massachusetts, Berkshire County,
Mhm.
and the interesting part about it that I was told when I first moved out there is it's a lot of vacation homes for a lot of wealthy people in the Northeast, but it's also like side by side by like abject crushing poverty from people who are living there 24/7. And
Yep.
so that was like an interesting counterpoint that I think affected really every story that I did over there. It used to be a GE town, General Electric. So actually, I will say that the story that really was influenced most by my time over there was actually my Hulk annual that came out last year.
Mhm.
Um, where that was set in a small town that like was rooted on one big business. In this case, it was Los Diablos Missile Base, which
Mhm.
was where Bruce Banner was working. And then when Bruce Banner turned into the Hulk, the base shut down. And so what happens to this town when their like main economic engine has been kind of yoinked away in such an abrupt fashion? But I think for me, working at the newspaper, is really about the broader skills. Like I said, like just knowing like, okay, you got to think on your feet when you're coming up with story ideas. The worst thing in the world is a blank page, and so if you write something, anything, you can kind of then start building off of that. You can always edit it later, and also just the way I tend to write my scripts in the same way that I used to write my newspaper articles. It's very modular,
Mhm.
where like you'll write a paragraph and you'll be like, this doesn't have enough setup. So, I'll bump it down a little bit and add some more setup, or vice versa, being like, I'm kind of bearing the lead here. Let me just kind of put this a little higher up. And so you'll lop off the beginning, you'll lop off the end, and you'll write new transitions, but like you kind of keep the meat of what you were saying. And I tend to do that a lot with my scripts. I'm usually kind of breaking it down. I write my treatments, but then I break it down page to page, and then I break it down panel to panel, and then I start adding in dialogue at the end. So yeah, that's I think really the big ways that my newspaper career it wound up impacting my writing career, but uh, not so much about like police procedural. Only because I was working in like rural Massachusetts, and that is a very far cry from what I was doing with Spencer and Locke.
Mhm.
But yeah, like I said, I definitely drew from that experience. And I think I do in certain ways, I still kind of mentally identify as a journalist.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it really helps in terms of the writing for sure.
Well, can I ask you this? How is it coming out the gate? And again, I won't spend too much time. I want to move on to other projects, and of course talk about uh, space, because that's what we're here for. But how was it, coming out the gate with something like Spencer and Locke? Again, that was, unfortunately, we don't hear a lot about like Action Lab now or anything, but especially at the time, like, you're putting out a book in Action Lab. They're putting out some really outstanding stuff. Some really good stuff, and this book comes out, and just again, everybody is talking about it. Like, holy shit, have you read this? This is so cool. I'm here in Jacksonville, Florida, so probably a little far away from where you are, but definitely I remember this book coming out, and I remember my that week that the book was coming out, my local comic shop owner, who I have a really good relationship with at the time, is like, dude, this book is you. Like, this is all you. You're gonna freaking love this. And I'm like, okay, bet. Like, I can't wait to read it. And it was just like, it really was. It was like the buzz all over the comic book shop, like when it was coming out and everything. Really, really cool.
What was your
Like,
shop? Do you remember?
yeah, it's called House of Comics and House of Comics and Games. It's closed down now. He closed down right before COVID, but yeah, sadly he's gone. But yeah, just I guess my question is like, how a lot of times people got to build up to something like that, and you're coming out the gate with like your very first book, like people are just like, this is it, this is really awesome. How was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of blew my mind a bit. I mean, I everything I did with that book, I approached it as, this may be the only thing I get to write, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to kind of take the biggest possible swing with it. And so you can see in Spencer and Locke, I was like, okay, like if I only write one book, I want to have like the fist fight, and I want to have the car chase, and I want to have the cool sci-fi bit, and I want to throw in some dinosaurs, and uh, and I kind of wanted the psychological element in addition to like the crime mystery. Um, and I did that, yeah, because I was just like, I don't know how this book's going to go. I mean, I did a riff that was, what if Calvin and Hobbes grew up in Sin City?
Yeah.
Bill Watterson and Calvin and Hobbes are like some of the most sacred cows there are in comics, and
Mm-hmm.
rightly so. I mean, he's a trailblazer and a pioneer and a visionary. And so, I wasn't sure. I knew there was going to be a ratio of people who loved it and a ratio of people who just would like absolutely hate the thing on principle, and I didn't know what that ratio was going to be. So, and that's so what I wound up doing is, I pushed that book as hard as humanly possible. My time in journalism and publicity was very helpful in that, like, I knew how to write a press release. I knew how to find like contact information for various websites. Being able to say, hey, like, I write a newsarama, and I know your work. I follow your work. Would you mind taking a look at this thing that I've done? Would you have a chance to do an interview? And I think the thing is that there's a tradition of comics journalists going into creative. You see it, Gail Simone, Matt Fraction, Kelly Thompson, Ryan K. Lindsay, Warren Ellis. Just rattle off a few off the top of my head, Paul Levitz, even. So that said, like, I think there are also creators out there, also critics and journalists out there who they try to kind of get their way in, but like it's kind of you see the work and you're like, I get why I like it. It hasn't like quite clicked yet. And so, but being able to say like, hey, like, I'm aware of your work, like, we're professional colleagues. That was just enough to kind of get them to be like, you know what, I'll give this a look, just like as a professional courtesy. And then they saw it and were like, oh, we really like this. And so,
Mm-hmm.
and I did something similar with the stores. I called something like, I called hundreds of stores. I was very fortunate in that I had a friend who worked at Diamond, and they were able to kind of give me a list of shops, not phone numbers, not addresses, all that stuff I had to kind of do on my own. But they at least gave me the names of like, here's like the names of like our, of the top however many stores. And so I was able to kind of like build my own list off of that, where I'm like, okay, this store is in this town, in this state, in this time zone. Here's the person that I've talked to, and here's the email address that they gave me. And so I was able to kind of really go, full court press on it and just be like, okay, here's my book. Here's the first issue. I'm going to give you the whole thing, so that we're like, we're playing for keeps. And I think a lot of stores were taken with the fact that like some creators, like, this is my first book, and I'm offering you the PDF, like, no strings attached. I just really, I would love to get you to order it. And I don't know if that made it a difference in terms of sales numbers or anything, but I think it being able to kind of do that and kind of get my face and my work out in front of so many people, that really kind of like, I think it was, you only get one opportunity to make a good first impression, and I feel like Spencer and Locke was like the best first impression I could have asked for. But that said, I had no idea that people it was going to be well received. There's a reason why it took me. My next books didn't come out for it was 2 years afterwards, and that was just because I was like, I have no idea if this book is reviled, I'm just not going to do this again. Like it's so much work, it's so much time and investment and money and heartache and. That like if nobody liked this, I would just be like, well, I'm gonna find another career, I guess.
Move on to the next thing.
Yeah. But I was so blown away by how that book was received. And I feel like honestly, like it's not something that I think could be replicated today. I think it was, we got really lucky that it was a certain moment in time. There was a certain moment in the industry and in social media and in comics journalism, the ecosystem of all that, I'm very grateful for all of that. But I'm also, I think, very acutely aware of how much things have changed, even since 2017. And so, that sort of becomes part of the job as you kind of figure out, all right, how do I adapt and how do I kind of keep building on that foundation and on that platform with each new book, but also knowing that like, there are new outlets out there. There are new stores out there, but also there are certain outlets that go away. There are journalists that retire. There are stores that close down. And so, it's kind of a constant exercise of just trying to reintroduce yourself for the people who might have missed you the first time around or who might only be getting to know you based on whatever the new project that you're announcing is today.
Yeah. And that makes perfect sense. And like you said, you took you go all the way from, I don't know. I don't have that information in front of me, but at least I want to say the middle of 2017, somewhere in there. But all the way up to going to the chapel, which is coming out in September of 2019.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. So going to the chapel from there, which is again, if I can talk, well about Spencer and Locke. Going to the chapel is a lot of fun. It's a very fun book. Really, really insane. Quick, easy read. 4-issue read. Really, really fun book. I love that book a lot, and I strongly suggest people check that out as well. And then God, I want to say. You're about 2021. You do Scout's Honor, which, man, I love that book. I love the concept of that book. I love the execution. The story is so wonderful. For anybody who hasn't read Scout's Honor, it's like, I don't know what your elevator pitch was, but I'll just throw this out there. It's like, post-apocalyptic world, and people are using like a Boy Scout handbook as like their Bible. That's just
I pitched that book as Mad Max meets the Hunger Games.
God, that's cool.
I was just saying, it's about a post-apocalyptic Boy Scout cult and how one of the young initiates we find out has a secret, and that she's a woman in this cult where women are not allowed to serve, and so she's had to conceal her gender identity in order to pursue her calling. And what happens when she finds out the cult was built on a lie? And so, that was honestly, out of all the books that I've done, that one might be the biggest surprise for me. That was the one I think from the jump. I had come up with that pitch. I was talking with Lee Kramer, who was in charge of Aftershock, and I've been trying to get on their radar for some time. I knew Mike Martz, who had been the editor-in-chief over there. I interned for him when he was at DC. Okay. And so I kept sending pitches, and none of them were going anywhere. And finally, I learned that Lee Kramer lived in Los Angeles, and so I invited him out to lunch. And I said, "Listen, man, like, how do I do this? How do we get across the plate with you guys?" And he was like, "Listen, if you send us like log lines, we can kind of then choose which one we like, and then you can kind of develop that, and we can kind of work with you on that." And so I don't think he expected me to send him like 12 log lines, but Scout's Honor was the 12th one. And it was just, I was like, I have 11 of these that I feel really strongly about. And, I just come up with this idea of like, what about a post-apocalyptic Boy Scout cult? What's the weirdest thing that could be a Bible? And of course, that's the one that Aftershock goes for. I I had to really quickly do a bunch of research and kind of throw together a pitch. And so it was one of those things that I wasn't sure like how the industry was going to view it. I had written that very differently than I had any other books, and also just like there was a lot of themes in that I hadn't really seen explored in a direct market book.
Mhm.
And so nobody was more blown away than me to see how positively it was responded. I mean, it remains one of the best reviewed books I've ever done. I think it's tied with the second volume of Spencer and Locke. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I that book honestly changed my career. That's the book that got me on Marvel's radar. I think Marvel kind of realized at that point I wasn't going away. Uh, they might as well offer me some work. Um, and yeah, and it really built a nice relationship, both with Mike Martz and Christina Harrington, who really took point on Scout's Honor. And they wound up editing my new book at Mad Cave, The Devil That Wears My Face.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm really I continue to be proud of that book. Both that and Chapel often feel a little bit like direct market counter programming,
Mhm.
but seeing the way that people responded to them and seeing how passionate they were about those books, yeah, I don't have any regrets. I feel really good about it.
Just again, that's such a wonderful book. I would never sit here and tell a creator like that's probably my favorite piece of your work, but I don't know. I think right now, I haven't read Space Ghost yet, but I don't know. I think that's my favorite piece of your work. It's
Thank
so
you.
good. It's and that's coming from the guy who wrote the Devil That Wears My Face. So that's
Thank you.
that's pretty high up there too. Really, really good stuff. But yeah, I love it. So let's talk about Marvel then. Let's move
Yeah,
into Marvel. And again, I promise right after that we'll get over
sure.
to Space Ghost, and I want to talk about that a good bit. But like you said, you got on Marvel's radar there. Based on that book, on Scout's Honor and everything. And it seems like I don't know. I don't know about you. I mean, you can give us the inside baseball or whatever the word is. Football. I don't know sports, but the inside sports game. But something happened over there at Marvel because it's not like they were handing you like scraps or anything. I mean, at least that I'm seeing. They're like, all right, we got some big stuff for you.
Yeah, yeah. Nobody was more surprised than me when I landed Savage Avengers.
Hmm.
I distinctly remember it was just before the July 4th holiday in 2021. Uh, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. 21 or 22, whatever. That summer before Savage Avengers came out. And what is time? And so.
No, I know.
Uh, uh, yeah, so I guess that was 21. And
Mhm.
so I remember sitting on my couch, my my now fiance, we were both freelancers. We both work from home. We
Mhm.
both work on the same couch. And I remember getting this email from Tom Brevoort, who I had been in touch with him over the years. I had given him Spencer and Locke, and every time I had a new book, I'd be like, "Hey, Tom, new thing." So I think I kind of wore him down. And then I get an email saying possible Marvel project, and I remember feeling like my soul kind of leaving my body,
Right.
and clearly something like changed in the air because our puppy, who was just I think she was only like 6 months old at the time or thereabouts, pounced on me. She clearly sensed something had
She's
happened.
like, I don't know, your blood pressure's going up, something's up
Yeah,
here.
she pounced on me. And so I remember I have to when you start working at Marvel, and I assume
Mhm.
it's the same way at DC. They make you fill out paperwork that basically says if we're coming up with a similar idea to the thing that you're about to pitch us, like it's a coincidence, you can't sue us. So I fill out that paperwork and I'm thinking, oh, like I'm really excited. I wonder what it's going to be. Like, is it an anthology story or, is it a one shot or, dare I ask, like, could it be a miniseries? Then Tom goes, so we are relaunching Savage Avengers and we wanted to see if you had any thoughts. And I felt like, again, my soul leave my body because I love the Avengers. It's my
Yes.
favorite. It's my favorite property besides like Spider-Man in all of comics. I love the idea of kind of throwing together Marvel's greatest and putting them in a room and seeing what happens. And there's so many cool takes on it, whether it's like the kind of the classic, Cap's Kooky Quartet kind of led team, or Bendis's New Avengers, which is sort of a little bit more of a modern reconstructionist kind of version of all that. And so I was like, oh yeah, like I've been dreaming about putting together my own Avengers team for years. And they said, but I saw it and I was like, but Savage Avengers, that's the Conan book. And I kind of had like a big question mark over my head, because I was like, I don't know what I would pitch for Conan. And then I remembered I had a creator-owned idea in my back pocket that I'm a huge fan of the Terminator movies, one of some of my favorite sci-fi movies. And I remember asking my fiance right around when we moved to Los Angeles, we did a rewatch of all that. And I said, why does the Terminator look like Conan the Barbarian? And I thought, oh, what if Skynet like modeled their T-800s based on like the scariest human they ever faced? And so I was like, I'd come up with this idea that I was of Conan versus the Terminator. And I wrote this outline. I was ready to pitch it to Dark Horse, who had the Conan rights and Terminator rights at the time. And literally the week I finished that outline, Marvel announces that they have the rights to Conan. So I was like, well, I guess that thing's not going to happen. Fast forward, I'm like, wait a minute, I have a Conan pitch. And so I told Tom, I said, what if we did Conan versus the Terminator, but we did a Deathlock? Because I'm a huge fan of Deathlock. Did not know at the time that Tom was one of the original editors on Deathlock. So he's got a soft spot for Deathlock. And so I said, what if we did like Sword and Sorcery Terminator? Like a Terminator hunting Conan across the Hyborian Age, and there's a bunch of heroes that get caught in the crossfire and they're stranded in the Hyborian Age, and how do they get home? And so that became kind of the spine of Savage Avengers, where it was sort of Savage Avengers by way of Exiles, which is a series I love. So what happened during that book was, as now everyone well knows, that as I was writing that book, I had done the development stage of it. I had written issue 1, I had written issue 2, and then word kind of came down from on high that Conan Properties had changed ownership, and so suddenly this licensing agreement that they had with Marvel was not going to be extended. So I was told I did until issue 8 to write Conan out, but I knew we were writing this in 5-issue chunks. So thankfully, when I pitched that book, I had said, we're in the Hyborian Age in Arc 1. That means we don't need Conan after Arc 1. We can always leave him there, depending on what the runway of the book looks like. We can have him come back, or we can have, if we go from the past to the distant future, we could have Conan having taken like the long way around or something. So we see old man Conan or something. And so, I got to use that escape hatch, and then we did a slight pivot for Arc 2 that, rather than it being like a post-apocalyptic future that was ruled by the cult of Set that had found Deathlock technology, instead we had a Deathlock army that was ruled over by Ultron in the year 2099. And so we were able to bring in Jake Gallows, the Punisher of 2099, as our new lead, as our sort of our replacement for Conan. And that was such a wild, fun series. Carlos Magno did such a great job on it, and very mythic and larger than life, and he threw in all sorts of cool details. And Savage Avengers is sort of, I feel like that was a real career highlight for me. I feel like I've been kind of chasing that high ever since. But I was able to kind of draw in stuff that I had come up with, 10 years prior, when I was writing my own fan fiction, trying to teach myself how to write comics. I had written Avengers scripts, and I had Cloak and Dagger as Avengers in those scripts. I had Daredevil, not Elektra, but I had Daredevil on that roster. And so it was kind of nice to be like, oh, wow, dreams do come true. That was a really fun experience. And Marvel was really great in that, they had committed to 10 issues when I pitched it. And, losing Conan, they could have very easily said, wrap it up at 5, like, get it done. Or, cut the thing down to 8, get it done. But Tom Brevoort and Marvel really stood by their commitment on that. And I continue to be grateful. It was, and I should also thank Jason Aaron, because I think it was because of Jason Aaron's King Conan that I think we were able to kind of go in under the wire. But
Mhm.
being able to write Conan's last appearance in the Marvel Universe was like a huge career highlight.
Right.
I think I was working on, I turned in issue 3 and I was about to start in issue 4, and I asked Tom, like, wait a minute, like there's no other Conan miniseries coming out, right? Like we're the last. And he's like, yeah, I think you are. And so it really kind of put a lot of pressure on me to make sure that we gave Conan like a big, cool, heroic ending.
Mhm.
So, ending, with him and his throne, with this Avengers flag in the background. It really, to me, it reinforced this message that, like, yeah, Conan didn't his return to Marvel wasn't that long, but it meant something. It counts. It meant something to him. It changed him. And so yeah, yeah, and I think it really just, between that and going to the chapel, like I think Savage Avengers really reinforced that, like, I love writing ensemble books. That's sort of what
Yeah.
my strength lies. And so every book that I do, I try to make it at least like a two-hander. Moon
Mhm.
Knight City of the Dead, we had Scarlet Scarab, and um, uh, for me, the more characters I can throw into the mix, the better the time I have, because it becomes a nice little mashup of voices and personalities and character traits, and watching them kind of clash against each other and cause
Mhm.
sparks. That's the kind of storytelling I really like. And so yeah, that's something that I keep trying to do in each and every project now.
And that was like, I mean, just circling back to Savage Avengers for a second, and again, just for a second, I'll get off of it. But that's quite a sandbox. You got to play with there with.
Yeah,
I mean, Weapon Age, with Agent Venom, or sorry, Anti Venom and
yeah.
Conan and all of that. I mean, just it's like the coolest combination. It's like you took like some of the coolest characters you can think of in the Marvel universe, in the 616 there, and or relevant universes or whatever, and we're able to play with those characters together, which is really really cool. Really, I really, that book is like really important to me. It's a really
Okay.
great run. No, thank you for writing it again. Um, Thank you. It's really amazing. I know everybody's read that, so I don't have to sit here and suggest that or anything. But yeah, just some really really good stuff there. Uh, so as that's wrapping up, what your 9 issue run there, and then you 2023. 2023 is like a big year at Marvel for you. You're doing, like you said, Moon Knight, City of the Dead, and holy shit, that's a really really amazing book.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And you get the new Punisher. You're the guy that, they're like, hey, we need a new Punisher, and you get this 4 issue series with Punisher, and then at the same time, so it's like Moon Knight City of the Dead's coming out. Devil That Where's My Face #1 is coming out. Punisher #1 is coming out. Just like hit after hit after hit there in 2023. Really good year for you. Um, I mean, I don't even know what my question was about that. I just, holy shit,
No,
that's really really
boy,
cool stuff.
that
But
was that was a crazy year. I don't think I've ever written quite as much as I did during that kind of. I I had I had Yeah, it was after Savage Avengers wrapped up.
Mhm.
Um, Things got really busy, busier than I've ever had it before or since. Where I was juggling. Yeah, Moon Knight City of the Dead came first, but also I was working on Avengers Unlimited at the time.
Mhm.
I think I was coming together with my second arc, so that was the Avengers and Guardians team up,
Mhm.
and then as I was wrapping up on Avengers Unlimited, Tom Brevoort came up and said, "Hey, we're doing a new Punisher series, and we're looking to do a new legacy character, and uh, here's sort of some thoughts that we have on it. And we really liked what you did with Jake Gallows and Savage
Mhm.
Avengers. So, would you have any interest in that?" And I have a pitch for just about everything in my back pocket, but like legacy Punisher, like, no, I hadn't thought about that.
Mhm.
And so, it was one of those things that, like, I knew it was kind of like a tightrope of an assignment, but also, I respect the hell out of Tom Brevoort.
Mhm.
I see him as a real mentor, and I've done most of my work at Marvel with him. I've been working with him for it's about 2.5 years now. And so I was like, yeah, like if you're editing it, yeah, I will tackle this mini series. And so we talked a lot about like, how do we make a legacy Punisher that kind of carves out his own niche.
Mhm.
And at the same time, also like I read newspapers. Like I know the Punisher as like a character, as a symbol, as a concept. It's very polarizing. It's very controversial.
Sure.
No matter where you are on the political spectrum, people seem to have very strong opinions of what a Punisher story should or should not be, and they're
Mhm.
often contradicting one another. Even more than like the way that like fandom's already kind of scattered and atomized. There's no consensus amongst fandom.
Mhm.
That's the whole thing. Uh, so I thought a lot about legacy characters that I really liked, and the one that really kind of stood out to me was Robbie Reyes as Ghost Rider, where you have all the other Ghost Riders, you have Johnny Blaze, you have Danny Ketch, they're skull dudes on motorcycles.
Yep.
That rips. Like, of course, that makes sense why that concept has endured for so long. And then Robbie Reyes shows up and he takes that kind of hell on wheels concept, and but he does it's muscle cars now,
Mhm.
kind of a little leaning Fast and the Furious. And I thought that that was really cool, like a cool way to kind of differentiate that character. So I thought, how do we do that for Joe Garrison? And I thought a lot about John Wick, where somebody like the Punisher, like Frank Castle, it's all about it really strikes me as about it's the guns and ammo. It's about
Mhm.
like sort of the subversiveness of it all. It's like pushing the violence as far as it'll go,
Oh yeah.
especially in a post Garth Ennis world.
Mhm.
Um, and I wanted to do something different. So for me, John Wick, it's about the choreography. It doesn't matter what kind of guns and ammo that Joe has, although he does have guns and ammo. But anything in his hands could be a weapon. Like it's very, it's kind of the way that like Damian Scott drew Batgirl back in the day,
Mhm.
where it's all hyperkinetic and it's all about like you put Joe in a room and you see how he leverages the setting to win a fight. You throw him into a restaurant, you throw him into an office building, you throw him into a park, and you kind of figure out like different ways for him to fight things. And the other thing that we stood, that making him part of Shield, because I
Mhm.
think that's something that a lot of people argue about, and I completely understand why. Which is like there are a lot of real world people in military or law enforcement who are like Punisher, that's my guy.
Yep. Mhm.
That's a symbol of extrajudicial vigilantism. That you want the people who are in charge of law enforcement to follow the rules, and so
You
it's
would
a little
think.
appealing to do that. So I wanted to make sure we could put the Punisher on kind of a little bit of a higher shelf. That
Mhm.
like I don't consider him to be an aspirational figure. So having Shield, be the guy, be the place. It's I am sort of subtly saying like if you're at home, like don't try this at home.
Yep. Mhm.
You need to be specially trained. You need to have a special shield arsenal. It's totally fine to enjoy this story for the escapism that it is, but like this is not a how-to guide. This is not a manual.
Mhm.
Um, and also, I thought having the shield arsenal was a great way to differentiate Joe, because in similar to a way that like Rick Remender had Frank Castle having like all this superhero and supervillain tech. I thought this was a way to like really organically kind of say we can elevate this. Like it doesn't have to be just like it's not going to be guns that you can buy at a Walmart.
Mhm.
This is something that like yeah we're putting it on a little bit of a higher shelf, but also you can do all sorts of cool things that like you couldn't do with like real world weaponry.
Yep.
Like tracker bullets or the stun chucks or the smart lens that can like hack into surveillance systems and kind of track people down. So yeah, but I think that book it wouldn't have worked without having Dave Wachter on
Mhm.
board. He's such a tremendously gifted artist. I know as we're talking, it's a final order cutoff for his new book, Uncanny Valley, over at Boom, which I read it the first issue. It's spectacular. And Dave and our colorist Dan Brown, um, really just a talented duo. That I think they really understood the assignment.
Mhm.
I talked a lot about. I said, look at Damien Scott's Batgirl, look at Akko on Midnighter. Like how do we kind of like really lean into the choreography of it all? And so, yeah, it's funny because, for all the controversy that that book had, and I understand, like, because again, nobody has Legacy Punisher on the bingo card,
Yep.
and we had to kind of really walk a tightrope. For many books, I can totally understand, of the political punch and counterpunch, but I was of the opinion that the volume was already very high in the room. The
Mhm.
temperature was already very high. How do we kind of like lower the temperature in the room a little bit? And so that said, of course, there's going to be people who, it's that's their thing is to,
Mhm.
be contrarian, or that, they've got their politics, and that's sort of their MO, is to try to leverage them. Um, but it wound up becoming my best reviewed book of Marvel. And so I can't complain. We covered a lot of ground in our 4-issue run. Um,
Mhm.
that was actually the biggest challenge when they asked me to do this, is that they said, okay, here's all these things that we're trying to do with Punisher, and here's sort of the landmines that we're trying to kind of sidestep. And by the way, can you do it in 4 issues? And I remember being like, oh man, like what I wouldn't like, I would have begged, borrowed, and stolen for a 5th issue,
Mhm.
because there was some cool stuff that I was like, oh, we can't quite fit it in, like, and but I wanted it to still be like Joe's story,
Yep.
I really wanted to have an issue where we could have him like fight like Spider-Man or Daredevil or something, but I was just
Mhm.
like, 4 issues, we don't have the room. And also, I didn't want that series to go out and people say, oh, well, the only reason that it worked is because he threw in Spider-Man.
Mhm.
I wanted
Mhm.
Joe to stand on his own 2 feet. Um, but yeah, I'm very proud of how that book turned out, and I've already heard rumblings about where Joe might appear next. So they sound very cool. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with that character, trying to kind of pitch him as like what makes a man into a Punisher. How do you
Mhm.
make that choice to become the Punisher? Because that's a loaded choice, both in the real world and in Marvel 616. So yeah, but I wanted, I sort of pitched him as like, eventually, I want him to be a Punisher for the people, sort of like the Equalizer, where if the law can't or won't help you, this is the guy you call to help you settle the score. And
Mhm.
that way you can have a Punisher who still does all these Punisher things. I wanted to make sure it still felt like a Punisher book, but it's a Punisher who punches up, and always remembers that it's not somebody who's sort of just marinated in tragedy and vengeance. This is also somebody who, like, I think the best Marvel characters, he's still looking out for the little guy. And
Yep.
I think that's what kind of um, justifies, I think, a Punisher in my mind, beyond just being kind of a gritty vigilante. Although I understand the appeal, but like, especially if you want to have him exist in the Marvel universe, like, and not get thrown under the jail by Spider-Man or Daredevil,
Mhm.
I think still remembering that there's a greater good out there is something that I think is very important, and I think can be easily overlooked even by veteran creators. But that's
Mhm.
something that Tom really impressed upon me, and it's something that I try to bring to all my work now.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I feel like I keep saying this about every single book that we're talking about, but man, that Punisher run, so good and just incredible what you were able to do with 4 issues. You read it, and I'd love to read it like as a trade or something, but you read it, and it's just uh, you get done, and you're like, God, how did you pack all that into 4 issues? How did you create? How did you tell this origin story of this whole new Punisher? And take something like you said, it's very divisive. Unfortunately, it's a very divisive character, and for
Yeah.
whatever reason, like we don't have to. I mean, I always try to shy away from anything political here, but with that being said, I am a very liberal type of person, myself. So what's happened with the Punisher throughout the years, and what's happened with the Punisher like very recently, it would make a lot of sense why we would need that name, like attached to a different character or whatever, whatever the reasoning for that is. And yeah, what you were able to do with that is just outstanding. Just really, really amazing stuff. And me and Bob, actually, Bob is my co-host. We basically, the point of our podcast, aside from doing interviews like this, is we take a brand new comic book each week, one comic book, and we completely break it down. Break down the story, art, beats, all that stuff. And whenever Punisher 1 came out, we were like, usually we do like a random, or we do like an audience participation. Like, what book do you want us to cover, whatever. When Punisher was coming out, Bob and I both looked at each other and we're like, there's no contest here. Like, we're doing Punisher. This is going to be great. So we did Punisher, and just both so blown away with that book. We just both absolutely loved it. And again, talking to so many people in the world of comics and everything, just, like you said, it's so well reviewed and everything. And you would think, that would be scary to take on something that's such a icon to people and everything else, and create like a legacy character out of it. But I don't know. I can't, what you were able to do with the character, what you and Dave were able to do with the character there, just wow. I can't imagine anybody else being able to do that. So,
well, thank you. Yeah, it was very scary. The night before the first issue came out, I was like, it was like flop sweat. Like, I was just like, it happens before the first issue of any project.
Mm-hmm.
You're just like, I have no idea how people are going to respond to this. It goes back to my very first book, which is there's always going to be a ratio of people who love it and a ratio of people who hate it.
Sure.
And you never know kind of what that ratio is going to be, and you hope the ratio comes out in your favor. Mm-hmm. And knock on wood, I've been really fortunate that it always seems to thus far have come out in my favor. And yeah, I think a book like that, especially, we were really kind of threading a lot of needles on that one. And so the fact that it feels like we stuck the landing, and that readers seemed satisfied with it, and our editor Tom Brevoort seemed satisfied with it. That's really all you can ask for.
Yeah, and again, such an amazing book. Look, I'm gonna stop talking about all of your past projects because we definitely have to get to Space Ghost, and I don't want to take up your entire night here, but Space Ghost coming out May 1st from Dynamite Comics. Let's talk about Space Ghost. How did you land this project? Did Dynamite come to you? You keep saying you got pitches in your back pocket. Was this something you had dreamed of for a while? Like, where'd Space Ghost come from?
No, this very much came out of left field. Similar to how I broke in at Marvel. I've known Nick Barucci over at Dynamite for about 15 years. And I've also really admired Nate Cosby, who's an editor over there. I interviewed Nate back when I was at Newsarama, when he wrote a book called Cowboy over in Archaea, which is with Chris Eliopoulos. Really great book. Very cartoony, but it had like a real sense of pathos to it. I was so impressed with the way that he juggled those tones. So every time I'd have a book out, I would email Nate and just be like, hey man, I got a new book out. Let me know, if you or Dynamite ever want to work together. And so Nate, I guess, he would keep getting those emails and keep getting PDFs. And so when Dynamite signed their deal with Warner Brothers Discovery to do a line of licensed comics like Thundercats and Space Ghost and Johnny Quest and Powerpuff Girls and I think Flintstones and Wizard of Oz. There's one more I'm forgetting, but when they put that team together, Nate passed my stuff to Joe Ryban, who's editing Space Ghost, and he was like, I really think David would be a good fit on this. You should really reach out to him. And so at New York Comic Con last year, they had just announced that new run, or that agreement, and they announced Declan Shalvey and Drew Moss on Thundercats. Joe comes to my table at New York Comic Con. He goes, listen, we just did this new deal with Warner Brothers, and we have a Space Ghost book. We think you're our top pick. Would you have any interest? And I just wrapped up on Punisher, and I had an opening in my schedule, and so I started thinking about it, and I was kind of like, I was familiar with Space Ghost, and I grew up in the '90s, so I knew Coast to Coast, and when I interned at DC, I learned about Alex Toth, and I learned about the history of Space Ghost, like as a traditional superhero that came out the same year as Adam West's Batman. And I had read, I don't remember if they did a re-release or somehow I got my hands on Joe Kelly and Ariel Olivetti's Space Ghost trade when I was interning. And so that was like a Batman Begins kind of relaunch, new origin for the character. And so I was so struck at the spectrum of tones that Space Ghost could inhabit. And in particular, the thing that really stood out to me was that nobody had really explored the history of how like Space Ghost wound up taking in Jan and Jace and Blip. And I thought, oh, that's like that's a cool storyline. Like it's something that it's funny. It's a series that's very often maligned, but there was that one kernel that I really enjoyed about it, which was in Frank Miller and Jim Lee's All Star Batman and Robin, which tried to explain like, well, why does Batman take in like a circus kid of all things? And I remember thinking about that. I was like, oh, that's a cool thing in that series. And so that was sort of the thunderbolt that hit me when Joe said, "Do you want to do Space Ghost?" So I was like, "Oh, like it's a family story. It's an ensemble piece. It's similar to the found family elements of Savage Avengers. This is about how like a lone cosmic vigilante crosses paths with two orphan teenagers, and based on the circumstances, has really no choice but to take them in. And how do they become his sidekicks? How do they become his trusted partners? How do they become this surrogate found family? And how do they become Space Ghost's new reason to live? And that I was like, oh, that's a Space Ghost story that hasn't been told. And it's one that I think is so character driven. And one that like, given how there's a whole generation of people who only know Space Ghost as a talk show host. And to be honest, there's a whole other generation that only knows him as sort of the Adam West campy original cartoon. We're able to kind of take those vibes and that design and the energy of the original 60s show and bring it into 2024 with 21st century storytelling sensibilities in a way that is not going to come across as grim and gritty. We're not looking for this to be oppressive, but it instead kind of sits tonally somewhere between like Batman the Animated Series and Batman the Long Halloween.
Wow.
And so we're able to take Space Ghost through this gauntlet of all of his iconic villains, while also kind of like showing how he as a character evolves alongside Jan and Jason Blip, and eventually how he kind of reclaims his humanity again.
I can't wait to read this because I don't have the synopsis or solicit, or I can't think of what word I'm talking about, but in front of me or anything. But it's whenever you look at the cover art for this thing, the cover art alone is just so striking. Just that regular A cover, just amazing. And then knowing that you're writing on it, and your whole creative team there, just really, really amazing. I really can't wait to read it. It's looking great. This, I have to ask you this, and if you can't answer, if you don't want to answer, like perfectly fine. We just move on to you give me a head nod and I keep going. But for a long time, at least for people like kind of in the same scene that I'm in or whatever, Dynamite was like a little divisive, like for a while it was like Dynamite books are kind of weird, like they're doing a lot of Vampirella, like stuff that and whenever you dig into it, really well written stuff with really striking visuals and all that, but just on the surface, like this isn't really for me, this is like kind of oddball stuff or whatever. And then like you said, they're kind of doing this relaunch and everything, they're doing a lot, they're taking some chances. And I know, Bob and I reviewed Thundercats, of course, and, absolutely loved that book, amazing. Gargoyles has been really good. There's a lot of stuff out there that's really, really good. Even the Disney villain stuff, and all of that, really, really good stuff. We recently did, and I'm trying to think of the writer's name on the book now. It's not coming to mind, but maybe I'll think of it in a minute. But we did Elvira meets H.P. Lovecraft, issue number 1. And
probably David Avalone. Yeah.
Yes, David Avalone. Okay. And it was, again, like I said a few minutes ago, sometimes we just throw books on a random wheel, like new number 1s that are coming out. Sometimes we ask our audience, what books they want us to cover, that kind of thing. And this happened to be a wheel week. So we put like 4 books on the wheel. We got like a Marvel number 1, a DC number 1, a really deep indie dive. And then we have this Dynamite book because we're like, Dynamite's got a new number 1, whatever, we'll throw it on there. The last couple have been pretty cool. So we throw it on there. We end up reading this book. And like, I mean, I shit you not. Like, Bob comes over, because we do the podcast here at my house together, and Bob really doesn't like to do anything remotely. So he doesn't like to, sit at his house and record like the way you and I are right now. He likes to come over and be face to face and do it.
Sure.
So Bob gets over here. It doesn't really say a word to me. We get the casual, like, hey, how are you, is out of the way. And then I'm like, I have the book sitting here next to me. I'm like, so what'd you think? And he's like, dude, I don't want to tell you what I thought, because holy shit. I mean, this, like, both of our jaws just hit the floor when we started talking about this book. And we were like, I had the lowest of expectations. Like, it was like, I wasn't expecting anything. It's an Elvira book. It's HP Lovecraft. Like, what are they going to do with this? I mean, it sounded preposterous, but holy crap. I mean, just the way that this thing was done and the top tier talent that Dynamite is using right now is just mind-blowing. It's insane. It's not anything you would expect. So if you're anything like I was before, like Bob was before, or anything like that, and you see Dynamite, or you see, those Red Sonja Elvira books, or Vampirella or something, you're like, that's not my scene. Like, no, dig into it, because I mean, you are absolutely missing out. Like 100%, 110%, really, really top tier stuff. So did you have any, of that whenever Dynamite first came to you? I know you said you knew some people over at Dynamite, so maybe not, but did you have any reservations? Like, what were your thoughts?
No, I mean, I think particularly with this project, I mean, Joe, as he was describing it, everything he said was, it really made everything he said made the project sound even more and more appealing. Both he and Dynamite and Warner Brothers all kind of recognized that, like, the original Space Ghost cartoon, those are 5-6 minutes a pop.
Yep.
There's no continuity, there's no backstory, there's no set history. Really, all those episodes barely had enough time to introduce a brand new villain, which you kind of only get to see what they do. Like Brack breaking out of prison, or Zorak breaking out of prison, or Brack trying to hijack like a gold freighter. But beyond the designs and the voice acting and just what are they trying to do this week, there's very little like backstory in any of these characters. And so I was told from the jump, like, you can kind of come up with something that feels organic and character driven and exciting. So that was that was very cool, having that kind of latitude. And also, I was told, like, listen, like, can you pitch us like a year's worth of story? And I said, could I do a year and an annual? And so I've pitched them 13 issues.
Wow.
And so, knock on wood, hopefully there's no catastrophes that would change that. But I'm about a third of the way through already. And so and Jonathan Lau is drawing like a Terminator. So we've got, this will be, if all goes well, this will be the longest run that I've ever had in a series. And so, those were all very appealing things to me, especially, right after sort of the tight time frame of Punisher. I was like, oh, kind of something that, like, I can really kind of stretch my legs a little bit and not have to worry about really anything other than, like, just how do I reinterpret this work in the most dynamic way possible. So, and also just, I feel like there's been so many creators who I really respect who have done books at Dynamite. Brian Edward Hill, Torrin Gronbeck, Mark Russell, just to name a few. So, like, I've never seen it as like, oh, like, Dynamite, because I know that there were some really great creators over there, Christopher Priest. And so, yeah, honestly, like, I've been knocking on that door for so long that I was like, yeah, like, but I will say that, and Phil Kennedy Johnson doing James Bond, of course, a good buddy of mine. But yeah, if anything, the thing that I was most surprised was, I was kind of like, the only reservation that I had ever had with Dynamite was, I don't know what I would do for half these licenses. Like, I don't know what I would write for Green Hornet, or or Red Sonja, because I think I was a generation too late for a lot of that, or even Elvira. But when they approached me with Space Ghost, and I immediately kind of said, well, what if we did it like this? And they responded with absolute enthusiasm. I was kind of like, okay. They pitched me on, like, something that, like, I think I could do a really good job at. So, yeah, I'm really excited with how the project's going. And being able to kind of explore these characters, to take what Alex Toth did when he designed all of them, and then kind of be able to dig even deeper than the cartoons originally allowed. It's a real gift. I'm really enjoying myself in this series, and yeah, it's the kind of assignment that honestly reminds me a lot of what I did on Savage Avengers.
Mhm.
Where like you kind of just get to take the ball and run with it, and you don't have to worry about anything else. And those assignments are not always there when you're writing at a professional level with licensed IP. So being able to do that with something like this, with a cartoon that has so much potential, so much untapped potential as Space Ghost, between the characters and between the just iconic bench of villains and all the different types of tones and genres of stories that you can tell with those villains.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, it's like, you know, it's just as iconic as Batman or Spider-Man or the Flash, and yet nobody has had a long run. I'm going to be the one that gets to have the longest running comics on Space Ghost, and holy hell, how amazing is that?
Yeah, well, it's very cool, and yeah, I mean, again, I can't wait to read this series, especially like you said, for a lot of people, in our age range. I assume I'm probably a little bit older than you, but I was born in the early '80s and grew up in the '90s and everything, and Space Ghost Coast to Coast was a huge deal. It was a lot of fun. You're getting to see that late at night and everything, and it's cool. It was cool when I was a teenager or whatever, whatever age I was, a preteen and all of that. And I think this is going to resonate with a lot of people because a lot of people are going to go back for that, come to it from that understanding, hey, it's Space Ghost Coast to Coast, but it's like a fleshed out story about where this character came from instead of, sitting here interviewing people and like doing a Beavis and Butthead style, uh, music video thing. But yeah, I see this going really, really well. And then knowing that you're the one, in there, fleshing it out,
Yeah,
it has so much promise behind it. So,
thank you.
uh, no, yeah, it's going to be really good. I'm very, very excited about that. So again, that's coming out May 1st. So I don't think we haven't hit FOC yet. That should be the first week of April, I would assume.
Yeah, April
April
8th.
8th.
April
Okay,
8th.
8th. Yes. Okay, cool. Yeah, so April 8th. So I'm going to point out right here, I'll just take like a quick second to say, and I always say this anytime anybody's got a book coming out, the very most important thing that you guys listening can do is hit your local comic book shop up and let them know you want that added to your pool before that FOC is up. Um, I'm not too worried that your local shop's not going to have it, but I think it's going to sell very, very well. So, if they order, 25, 50 copies or whatever, and then you walk in 30 minutes after opening and it's all gone, you're going to be a little pissed off at yourself. So,
Yes.
hit them up before that FOC and make sure you add it to your pool. And hell, I mean, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be hitting my local shop up and be like, just, follow me throughout. I heard from inside sources that we're getting 12 issues plus an annual. So throw them all on my pool, make sure that I'm good to go.
Yeah.
Throw some variant covers in there, whatever. But
The thing is I would write more.
mhm,
It's one of those things that the best part about Space Ghost is also the hardest part about Space Ghost, which
mhm,
is there's so much cool stuff that you have to choose. And
yep.
we're actually structuring this in similar to the way of Batman: The Long Halloween. We're doing a lot of done in ones. We're doing a lot of self-contained stories because
Mhm,
we want to hit as many of Space Ghost's villains as possible. So you'll see Zorak and Brack and Metalis and the Council of Doom, but you also see a few deeper cuts that
mhm,
you might not expect, because I rewatched every episode of the 60s round. I rewatched every episode of the 80s revival and Space Stars. I watched Batman and Space Ghost team up in The Brave and the Bold. I
mhm,
reread all the comics appearances, the Joe Kelly run, Jeff Parker and Doc Shanner on Future Quest, Future Quest Presents, even Mark Evanier and Steve Rude on their Comico one shot. I read everything. I took extensive notes, but I look at books like Ryan North's Fantastic Four, Steve Orlando and Scarlet Witch, Jed McKay and Moon Knight.
mhm,
Those books are enjoying a lot of well-deserved success, and I think a big part of that is because of how they structure it. Where
yep.
if you pick up an issue of Space Ghost every month, you're going to get a self-contained story,
Mhm,
and that way, when we do have the occasional two-parter, it's only for like the biggest of bads. It's only when we want to show Space Ghost really on his heels,
mhm,
and really reclaim the power of a cliffhanger, being like, "Oh man, what is Space Ghost going to do next month?" And so, and then, we might have a 3-parter down the line if we want to do something really ambitious. But yeah, I would write more. There are certain villains, like, for example, like Eclipse Woman. She was Space Stars, or the Antimatter Man. I think those are so cool. And I had to really be like, but I can't. They're too cool to try to shoehorn in, but they're, but I can't. They don't make that top cut. But I really would love to tell those stories. So if the demand is there, and Dynamite and Warner Brothers want more than the original pitch, like there are lots of extra stories we can kind of slot in there, and it would kind of happen pretty seamlessly. So yeah, tell your local comic shop, pre-order Space Ghost, because I will write this thing as long as they'll have me.
Yeah, and like you said, tell your local shop to order that. Tell them to add it to your pool. You have until April 8th, but I mean, there's no need in even waiting that long. We're recording today, March 18th. Get yourself to the local comic book shop, call them, do whatever you got to do, and make sure it's added to your pool so you have a copy of this thing. And I'm sure, it's Dynamite, so there's going to be, like I was talking about a minute ago, there's going to be some amazing covers to this thing. The regular A cover is like one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life. But just knowing that there's probably going to be a version of that, there's probably going to be some really rad, 1 in 25s, 1 in 50s, 1 in 100s. Do whatever you got to do. Order a few copies of this thing to get some incentives, whatever. But you're definitely going to want this, and I definitely want it. So really, really excited about this. I foresee some really cool Space Ghost stories in the future, and I can't wait to read those, especially knowing now that they're kind of self-contained. I'm really, really up on that. I love that a lot. We just had Steve Orlando on, I don't know, about a month ago at this point, and I couldn't help but fanboy out into the Scarlet Witch stuff because of that whole somewhat self-contained, story stuff that was going, the elements of the way that story was told. I'm a huge comic fan. I love my big events. I love, stories that last 200 issues. There's so much that I love about comics, but at the same time, it is that nice breath of fresh air, to just say, I can just pick this up and read it, and I can pick it up and read it again, and I can read it again because it's just fun, and it's a good story, and it's contained here, and then it carries on to the next issue, but I don't have to go back and read that one to read the next one and everything.
Yeah. Exactly.
A lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to that structure, and I'm glad that you told us that, so we know that going in. I don't know. I again, I don't want to hijack your whole evening. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but yeah, we got Space Ghost coming May 1st. Cannot wait. Devil That Wears My Face.
Yeah, the last issue is out on May 8th. So you can pre-order issue 6 at your local comic shop. Issues 1 through 5 are already out. Face Off meets The Exorcist, about an 18th century Vatican priest who performs an exorcism which backfires, and so he's trapped in a stranger's body while his body's been hijacked by the demon known as Legion, who is tearing apart the Vatican from the inside. So super fun. Our last issue's got a big fun twist that I think is very personal to me, and that I think will kind of turn the rest of the series on its ear. You'll have to do a whole reread to be like, oh, he was setting that up. And nobody's guessed it yet. So very excited about that book, and yeah, I can't wait for people to read it.
Yeah, I can't wait for the wrap up of that. It's been so good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'm sad that it's gonna go, but knowing that you put your whole heart into that last issue, and it's got
Alex Cormack did a spectacular job on the art. I consider him a good friend, wonderful collaborator, and he and I are already sort of putting our heads together on what we're going to work on together next.
Amazing. Thank God. And that kind of brings me around to, wrapping this thing up.
Sure.
Like you said, we've got Space Ghost, and sorry to keep reiterating, but for the audience there, we got Space Ghost coming out May 1st, so with the FOC of April 8th. So again, make sure you get those orders in. And we've got Devil That Wears My Face wrapping up. Is there anything else in the works you want to talk about? I mean, I'm sure a lot of your attention is devoted to telling the best Space Ghost you can. But
I've got a few other things that haven't been announced yet. I've got a creator-owned project that I'm hoping we'll be able to talk about later this year, if not early next year. I'm working on some more big two stuff right now. That I don't know when I don't know when I'll be able to talk about that. And I'm still pretty early on this project, but Space Ghost is kind of my baby right now. I'm kind of putting everything I got into it. Now that I've sort of come out the other side of what had been kind of the marathon of Moon Knight, City of the Dead, and Devil, and Punisher, which I kind of wrote back to back to back. And sometimes I would kind of jump from one issue to the next. It's been kind of nice to just like focus 100% of my attention on one thing for now. But that's changing already, and I'll be splitting my focus again. But yeah, Space Ghost is it's such a gift of a book that I would kick myself if I didn't give 110% to it. So I'm having a lot of fun with it. If you like my work on Savage Avengers or even my work on Spencer and Locke, it's not as bleak as Spencer and Locke, but if you like the profound family elements of my work, that is returning with a vengeance in Space Ghost. So call your local comic shop to pre-order. We got some amazing covers. Francisco Mattina, Bjorn Behrens, Jay Lee, Michael Cho. We've also got blank covers, foil covers, virgin covers, line art covers. You name it, your comic shop should be able to hook you up.
Well, there you go. You heard it here first. Make sure that you grab that blank cover and then take it to a con and get David to, I don't know, draw a stick figure or something on the front of that thing. So really amazing though. Hey, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk to me. This has been such an awesome conversation, and you've really opened my eyes to some cool stuff that I didn't know about, already being a huge fan of yours anyways. So really excited for what the future holds for you. More than anything, I'm so excited to read the Space Ghost book. It's going to be amazing. I just know it's going to be a very, very important book in the world of comics. Again, you guys, that is May 1st. April 8th is your final order cutoff. Hit your local comic book shop over right now after you hear this and let them know that you want that added to your pull list. David, go enjoy the rest of your day. I guess you got daytime still left there over on the West Coast, but
I'll just grab dinner and then actually get back to writing Space Ghost.
Back to the grind. Well, thank you so much. And I know what I'm doing tonight. I'm going to go dig up some of those old Space Ghost cartoons and try to catch up a little bit on some lore. But again, man, I can't thank you enough. It's been amazing talking to you. Greatly, greatly appreciated.
And I hope thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Hope you have a wonderful night.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of episode number 62 of the all new, all different #1 comics podcast. Bob, I think this is the first time we've done that, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, why not do it to be continued?
Yeah, we got our own to be continued. I like it. Yeah,
exactly. In the next episode, I kill Dane and take over.
Hey, might as well, right? We had a lot of firsts on this one. We had our first rub and sniff cover. We had our first something else, and now our first to be continued. Yeah. So. Thank you guys so much for listening to part 1, where we, of course, covered Man's Best, issue number 1. And in this episode, you're going to be checking out the David Pepose interview right before the part that I'm speaking right now. But to get back to the podcast proper, Bob, I think it's time that we go over the books that are coming out next week. Yes. Before we do so, we need disclaimer time. It's now disclaimer time. Welcome to disclaimer time with Bob.
See, now do you feel better? You got right? Your turn.
I got my turn. Oh, that was the other first. You had your first disclaimer.
Exactly.
Time. So, wow. Full of firsts this time.
So, like I always say, each and every podcast, these are just a few of the books that are coming out next week. And if you want a more in-depth list, please consult elsewhere. Call your local comic shop. Send an email. Harry Potter Owl.
Please get those Harry Potter owls out there. I mean, just imagine, in your neighborhood, how many owls are just standing there waiting for someone to send a letter or something. They feel worthless. They're just biding time, sitting around on tree limbs or whatever, eating mice. They want something to do.
So that's why owls were born.
Exactly. To deliver messages.
Oh,
okay,
I
mean, it's an important job. It's like those dogs that have the little little
the casks of liquid. Or
There you go.
whatever.
Right. Yeah, it's like those dogs.
Yeah, I know
I
what
mean,
you're
yeah,
talking about.
And I mean, hell, you can get yourself one of those dogs. Wrap up a letter in that. Have it, run to your local comic book shop for you, and tell it to come back with a letter explaining all the titles that are coming out. If you live in Jacksonville, Florida, like Bob and I do, right? If you live in Jacksonville, Florida, like Bob and I do, all you have to do is send your dog over to Gotham City Limit and tell Ben K or Jonathan that you want to hear all about every single title and the synopsis and their review of what's coming out next week. And they'll have no problem doing it. And tell them that Bob sent you from the all-new, all-different #1 Comics podcast.
I'm sure Pacer and that dog would get along great.
Right? Or it'd be like a, horrible battle where Pacer wants the little vial of liquid and, yeah.
Yeah. So, starting off the list from Image, we have Feral #1. Speaking of dogs and animals in general.
Man, I'm excited about this one. It's not a sequel series to Stray Dogs, but it is from the creators. And it's about cats instead of dogs. And this is about 3 indoor cats who become lost outdoors during a nightmarish rabies outbreak. So you finally read Stray Dogs, so you know where this might go. Pretty crazy. I'm really excited about this book, actually.
It does sound like an animal version of The Last of Us.
Right? Yeah, it sounds terrifying.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, this has the potential to be a really great book.
An imprint we don't talk about that much from Distillery. We have White Boat #1.
The sad thing about this imprint, this publisher here, is I really like the stuff they're coming out with. I really like the creators that work on these books and everything. They get top-notch talent here. But it's that eternal problem where I just don't want a whole bunch of magazine-sized stuff sitting around. It's also very expensive, $8-9 books instead of like a $3 or $4.99. Not that I don't mind paying the price of the contents there. And the content's there. I mean, it's really good stuff. But it's just it's a hard sell. Why not just have regular sized issues? What's the problem with the regular sized issue? I'll get off my soapbox. This one is white boats are the mega yachts that the rich use to trap and transport victims to a remote island where secret cults that have existed for millennia work on something called the Human Project.
Wow.
So a little terrifying. This one is written by Scott Snyder. Yes, that's Scott Snyder. And illustrated by Francisco Francavilla. So this is about to be the most beautiful book you've ever seen in your life. I'm definitely going to get a copy. But
very well written.
Yes. I'll definitely pick up a copy. But damn, I don't want to keep picking up magazine-sized short boxes. That's all I can say.
Yeah, that's a good point. From DC, we have Batman Dark Age #1, and this is going to be one of Dan's personal favorites.
Bob, I'm excited about this book. Why? Well, for a myriad of reasons, but first and foremost, we know who the writer on this book is. It is Mark Russell, who we talked to just a little while ago on the podcast, and we actually talked about this book. I have been looking so forward to this. It's going to be amazing. It's the, Superman space age treatment to Batman. It's going to be wonderful. And hey, it just so happens to have my all-time favorite artist of anything, Mike Allred, and his wife, Laura Allred, on colors. So
that doesn't hurt.
Yeah. Even if for some reason it's not the most amazingly written thing, which it's going to be because it's Mark Russell, it will be the most beautiful Batman you've ever seen in your life. I can't wait to pick this up. I'm so excited.
Yes, it actually makes Dan interested in Batman.
Right?
That's a chore in itself.
It sure is.
From going back to Marvel, we have The Incredible Hulk #10.
This one has one of Bob's favorites, a possible first, and this is the possible first appearance of the Ghost Detective.
I'm guessing the Ghost Detective is the detective who's ghost?
Maybe it's kind of like the Dead Boy Detectives.
Possible. A Sandman Incredible Hulk crossover.
Hey, why not?
They're two different two different imprints.
That's okay. We had Amalgam.
That's true. That touche, sir. Touche. Sticking with Marvel, we have Miles Morales Spider-Man number 18.
Bob, this one's an oversized 300th issue of Miles Morales headlining a title. That's, interesting. So, I don't know. It's written by Cody Ziegler, so we got some faith in it, but
300 titles with Miles Morales as the lead.
Can't believe it.
I know. that seems like a lot. Sticking with Marvel, we have X-Men 97 number 1.
Bob, I can't wait. This is the prelude to the Disney Plus animated reboot that dropped today on Disney Plus. And I get to see my girl Jubilee again. I can't wait. She better be popping some bubble gum, is all I can say.
We have Edge of Spider-Verse number 2.
Bob, stay with me now. This one has the first appearance of Spooky Man.
No, you have to say it right. Of Spooky Man.
Wait a second. Is it Halloween in here? What just happened? The lights just flickered. You guys can't see it, but all of a sudden, Bob's face turned into a jack-o'-lantern.
We have Jackpot / Black Cat number 1.
This is part of a 4-issue limited series.
And finally, at least on this list, we have Ultimate Spider-Man number 3.
Of course, always worth picking up any of the new Ultimate titles,
Yes.
especially Spider-Man.
Yes.
This one's got Spider-Man and Green Goblin teaming up to fight a new villain.
Who
So
that villain is, you'll have to pick it up.
you'll have to pick it up to find out. That's right. That's the only way to tell. Those are the new books from that source. Let's, of course, talk about some books from a couple of other sources. From Image Comics, we got Philadelphia issue 34. Amazing book. We also have Local Man Bad Girls number 1. Really excited to check that one out. Sam and Twitch Case Files number 1. So a Spawn spinoff there. Should be a lot of fun. We've also got a new book called Under York number 1. This one is a miniseries premiere. It looks really cool. I'm assuming that it's something under New York or something like that, but it looks like a lot of fun. And I think I said each one of those books was a lot of fun. So, again, if you're taking shots, I apologize for the drunkenness.
It's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. From DC Comics, we got Primer issue number 1. That's a new number 1 in the DC universe. Don't know much about that character or if this is their first appearance. From Scout Comics, we got Choco Liche number 1. Don't know what to say there. We also have some great books coming out from Boom Studios. We've got Mighty Morphin Power Rangers 118, as well as Berserker Poetry of Madness pen and ink. That's right. Berserker Poetry of Madness is getting a pen and ink inclusion there, so make sure you check that one out. We've got Ghostbusters Back in Town, issue number 1 from Dark Horse Comics, as well as The Goon. Them That Don't Stay Dead, issue number 1, so a spinoff in the Gooniverse. I just wanted to be able to say Gooniverse, right? I mean,
you were waiting to say that.
I don't know
weren't
if that's
you?
been coined already, but if it hasn't, somebody really missed an opportunity there is really all I can say. From Opus Comics, we got Cradle of Filth, Queen of Winter, issue number 1. And from Blood Moon, we have Land Left Behind, issue number 1. I know I talked about this before, but I guess it got delayed. So hopefully this one comes out. But it's got dinosaurs in it, so it better come out because I love my dinosaurs. Morning Star, issue number 1 comes out. I actually interviewed one of the writers on that book just a little while ago, and we talked quite a bit about it. So really, really stoked to check that one out. And don't forget that issue number 5 of The Sickness from Uncivilized comes out. That is a wonderful, wonderful book. And if you like insane horror that's going to keep you up all night, make sure you check that one out. And those are some of the books that are coming out next week in addition. Let's go ahead and move over to our lovely, not sponsored by wheelofnames.com to figure out what book we'll be covering next week. Bob, of course, we've got 3 books on the wheel here. It's up between Batman, Dark Age, Feral, and Ghostbusters Back in Town. Bob, either way, it's going to be a good week, I think. So I'm really excited to spin this thing and see where it lands. And it looks like next week we're going to be covering Feral issue number 1, Bob. So that's where we've landed. No Ghostbusters, no Mike Allred, but we get Feral. Excited to check that out. Cats with rabies. I'm terrified. I hope you have your rabies shot, Bob, because oof. it's not looking good for you.
You'll find out.
Ouch. Well, that scares me even more. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you for checking out our really, really intriguing David Pepose interview. And as always, make sure you check us out on social media. We are on Instagram under ANAD_1 Comics Podcast. We're on Twitter or X at ANADNO Comic Pod. You can also check us out on TikTok for as long as that exists at ANAD1 Comics Pod, and the comic book channel on YouTube. This week and every single week, we like to give away a copy of the book that we reviewed. All you have to do is use the hashtag AllNewAllDifferentNation in a social media post of your choice to be entered in the giveaway. And hey, if you live in Jacksonville, Florida, stop by Gotham City Limit. Tell Ben K, Jonathan, and Pacer that we said hey, and that the All New, All Different #1 Comics podcast sent you there. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.